when she was my student, I think I was basically her student. That's when I first met Brother Coleman, and I was so impressed. A young person to know so much about our history and to present it in a way that's understandable. Okay? And he's known far and wide, coast to coast, in and out of the country. And he belongs to us. Isn't that wonderful? He belongs to us. So, Brother Coleman, you and your family know that I have a habit of bragging about people I know. All right, I make them blood relatives of mine. So, the people, he used to come to your college to speak. And I said, this is our Brother Coleman. And as soon as they say your blood brother, I said, yeah, you're the same parents, yeah. So I want you to welcome our educator in residence, someone who loves our children, who loves to teach, and is brilliant. So let's welcome our blood brother, Brother Coleman, Amanda, I want you.
My brothers and sisters. Hotep. Hotep to that side. I walked down this side. Hotep to everybody. All of us. It is such a pleasure to be back at United African Movement. It is an honor to be back at United African Movement. I am so very happy. And I thank my brother, Attorney Alton Mallet. And I thank his queen, our sister Leona. Because certainly he would not be as great as he is if it wasn't for the queen. Because it is the king who sits on the throne who is the queen. And I thank my queen, Sharon. I thank my children for supporting me in the work that I do and making it comfortable for me to be able to come out here and talk to us as a people. And I'm just so happy to be an African in this century. Because before this century is over, things are going to change. I can feel it. Can you feel it? And I know that we face daunting challenges. I know that we're looking at it constantly. But if you study your history, you know that we have overcome even greater challenges than this. And I often reflect back on our ancestors when I'm wondering how I'm going to get the strength. I always call on our Sister Harriet. She's my hero. I just call on Sister Harriet and I say that whatever spirit got into you, just the second trip, forget about all the 19 trips, just the second trip, after you were free and everything was all right, to come back down and to do it again. Whatever that spirit was that made you do it 2 times, just give me a piece of that. But then to think she did it a 3rd, a 4th, a 5th, I am ashamed to talk about rough times. That's real. If she could do what she did, I have no right to talk about what we're facing. I think of R. Kelly's song, I Believe I Can Fly. And I often tell the story to young people in particular, but us in general. Because put aside that it was a soundtrack for a movie called Space Jam. Put that aside and just listen to those words and realize that back in the 90s, I had the opportunity to be a part of a rite of passage program at Rikers Island. And there was a brother, part of the program was a song. The brother stood up and he sang a song, and he didn't sound like R. Kelly, I'll tell you that. He had a very sad, moaning, droning voice. But for the first time, because of the quality and the content and the character of his voice, it gave me a chance to listen to those words from a different perspective. And since I was sitting in the chapel in Rikers Island, looking out at high school students, because you know the Board of Ed has a school in Rikers Island, I was able to set myself back in time to a plantation and to picture those words being sung by African people, male and female, on a plantation. And I encourage you, the first thing that you do, if you get the opportunity tonight or tomorrow, listen to that song, listen to the words, but listen to it as an anthem that was sung by our people on the plantations of not just the United States, but of the Caribbean, of Central and South America. And you'll get a totally new meaning for those words. But I tell you this story because in the song he talks about what he believes he can do. He believes he can fly. You know, black folks believe they can fly. In fact, listen, well, that's a whole other time I gotta come down and talk to you about that. But the idea is that when they talked about what they envisioned as their greatest dream, we are that dream. We are the walking, living image of what they said they could become if just given a chance to fly. And so in connection with what we said earlier, and what Reverend Oliver has informed us, and what our sister Cody has told us is about to come, looking at Harriet Tubman and understanding that the Freedom Retreat will begin this week and for the month of July. Studying our history, because you know, I've often believed that historians, you know, the funny thing about psychics, everybody go to psychics to get information. And they have prophets that they believe are psychics. But the reality is that a prophet is not a psychic. A prophet is just a good historian. Because if you know what has happened in the past, you can interpret your future. If you can understand your past, you can understand why your present is what it is. Because nothing happens in a vacuum. Nothing happens as if steps are jumped. Everything is led up to by the step just before what happened. And so prophets, in understanding the past, can interpret the present and project and foretell the future. And so while we think that they are pulling at this information from a cosmic reality, which is the second presentation I got to come back and talk to you about, they're really just good historians. So probably we as a people, in studying our history, being denied our history, has made us get deeper into our history. As Arturo Schomburg said, when he was told in Puerto Rico that his people did not come from anything, he made it his business to find out exactly what they had done. Right. And in doing so, he uncovered chem mystery, as Dr. Yibo teaches us. Chem mystery, black mystery, black magic. And so living amongst us, we have had some of the greatest prophets that have ever walked the planet. And I could go through a whole litany of names, and I'm sure that our libations do this, but we honor Professor John Henry Clark for being a great prophet. We honor our sister, a name whom we do not call that frequently, but should be up there with them all. Our sister, Dr. Shashi Charlotte McIntyre. We should understand and understand that one of our greatest prophets was none before, also known as Dr. Asa G. Hilliard III. And we had our Dr. Benz. And again, I could go through all the names, living and those that walk amongst us today, as some of the greatest prophets that have ever walked this planet. But not just that. Each and every one of us who comes here this evening is a prophet Because you understand your past, and that's why you're here this evening, in order to prepare for your future. And to prepare for our children a better way. Because they deserve the best, even if they don't see themselves as the best. And I try not to talk about superiority and inferiority, because I do believe that it's the content of your character that makes you who you are. But when an individual, no matter what their cultural background may be, is held down, and everything they attempt to do, they are held down. Yet despite and in spite of that being held down mentally, physically, and spiritually, and still they rise. For those who did not have to go through that, they are superior. By the nature of their experience, they are superior. Not because they're born superior, but because they became superior. And as an African people, I'm sure our parents, I know my parents told me, to be equal, you must be superior. If your teacher gives you 5 math problems, you do 10. If she gives you 1 chapter, you do 2. Or whatever you do more than what's expected, because when all is said and done, they're only going to test you on what they expected you to do. So brothers and sisters, we come here this evening to talk about us as a people. We are a great people. And I respect all faith systems. But if we don't get to the bottom line of the fact that if in fact, as Sister said, we are born in the image of him and her. But I can't deal with that male God thing. I'm sorry. I have cognitive dissonance on that. That that sends shivers up my spine to ever think that we would say that God created us in his image, and yet the most of the world is female. I just have a problem with that from a fundamental perspective, and I'm very comfortable in my maleness to understand the power of the female. And if I can take it one step further, I stand in front of you as an individual who is half man and half woman. And so when I celebrate Women's History Month, I'm not celebrating the women in my life, I'm celebrating the woman within. And I'm comfortable to say something like that. I have no problem saying it. Because I understand what I mean when I say it. And we have to understand this as a principle, because each and every one of us, to complete this thought, each and every one of us from an African perspective is in fact God, having a human experience. We are God. So don't look for God out there. Don't even look for God in here. If you want to see God, go to your mirror and say hello to your God. And the measure of our life is when we look to each other and how we treat each other, because how I treat another individual, no matter in what station in life, I am in fact treating God. No matter what station in life. And as I look at God's creations, from the ants to the elephants, how I treat that animal is how I treat God on earth. As I look at plants, how I view that plant is how I view God's presence on this earth. And as an African person, in the research I've done, as much more as I have to do, what I have come to realize is that our people are very comfortable with who they are, for the most part, if they're conscious. Not only conscious, but you must be conscious of your consciousness. You must be able to not only know, but know that you know. And then act from that principle. And brothers and sisters, we are all learning. By matter of degree, we're all learning. And that's the wonderful thing about education, is that the more you learn how much more there is to learn. And so I'm very comfortable with knowing that. But in many ways, brothers and sisters, the great majority of us do not realize exactly who we are as a people and where we are. Right. And why what is happening to us is happening to us. Because my mother used to always say to me, God bless the person that can view the world from someone else's perspective, as opposed to always staying within and talking about what you are perceiving. Step out and look at you from someone else's perspective and view you from someone else's perspective. That's a great deal of power. And as I view peoples of European descent, I don't blame them for doing what they're doing. Because I would do it to us if I were them. I would never let us do what we're going to do soon. My only thing is I wonder why they just didn't kill us all right after 1865. Because if I were them, I would have just lined us all up. And that would have been the basis of inventing the cannon, just to mow us all down. If I thought like them. If you read Bobby E. Wright's work, The Racial Behavior of the Psychopath, if you read Joy Degree Leary's work, Post-Traumatic Disorder, if you read the work of Edwin Nichols and his axiology and his perceptions of life, it allows you to have the personal ammunition to go out here and understand why you are experiencing what you're experiencing. It'll help you understand why you're on a train reading a book while everybody got to know what's that about. But they can't imagine you reading. And forget about what you read. This is a reality. Come on, brothers, get on an elevator. With people outside of your own culture on the elevator, and somewhere on the ride, go like this. And see what will happen. They will make new doors and pathways onto the floor, even if there was no floor there. Brothers, think about what I'm saying. The natural fear that they have. So when you're walking, and when I work with our young people, I try to get them to understand, they don't hate us. They fear us because they so admire us. And as Francis Cresswell says, they wish they were us because we have a chemical substance that is not taught in education and yet is the foundations of organic life. Talk about melanin. The foundations of life is not taught. When we're in our schools and we're learning biology and they do not teach you the function of melanin as a molecule, the melanocyte as a cell, eumelanin in the body, neuromelanin in the brain is equivalent to teaching somebody car mechanics and never teaching them the role of gasoline. That is what makes the car run. You can build your car, you can fix the car, but if you don't know what gasoline does in the car, what's the purpose of the car? And that's the role of melanin. Brothers and sisters, we don't know who we are. As Sister Cody spoke of those that will lay in the sun, they will lay in the sun and they lay in things that look like caskets. Knowing full well that if you stay in there long enough, you're going to get melanoma. They will risk their lives to look like us. They will risk their lives. Many African American peoples, when you study the psychology of well-melanated people as to why they will carve up their nose and bleach their face and do things to their bodies to look other than themselves, it is because they want a particular station in life. They want to be treated a certain way, and they've been taught if you look a certain way, you will get something out of life. We don't do it because we're not happy with ourselves. We do it because we're not happy with the way in which our lives are going because of the nature of what they've taught us about the characteristics of being the original human being. They, in turn, when they are getting larger parts of bodies and cutting up their faces and their bodies, And when the peoples in the Elizabethan period used to put on one of them corsets and have somebody get behind them and just put their foot in their back and pull it back and almost choke to death, they did it because they wanted to look like you. They wanted it to flare out, flare up, flare over, to look like you. Because it would be only natural that since we were the first human beings on the planet for millions of years, that we would in fact be in the image of God. But God made a mistake by going north of the 51st parallel and getting caught in what we call the 4th Ice Age or the Wormian Ice Age. That is where the story of the prodigal son comes. Leaving the Garden of Eden with all the riches that you have, to venture into another land, only to find out, to really find yourself, you just have to come on home. And when you think of coming home, I think of L. Frank Baum's story of The Wizard of Oz, which I teach as a psychological dimension of the human being. He was a brilliant man. He was a white supremacist. But that story is dynamically psychological when you stop and think about it. When you think of the African traditions of the Osarian drama and those things that we seek in life. Because what really are you looking for in life? You're looking for intellect. Intellect, knowledge, wisdom, represented by Ma'at and Tahuti. You're looking for a heart, represented by Ma'at. You're looking for courage, represented by the Jed column, locks of hair. And the bottom line is, life is celebrated when you go home. And that's all Dorothy wanted to do, was to go home. And yet she's thrown into this horrific cataclysm that sends her in her house reeling through space. She ends up in this land where she hears these little voices. These little voices in our head. Follow the yellow brick road. Follow the path of Ma'at. And where are you going? To Emerald City, the land of Sar, the green land. And there you'll find the Wiz. She goes and she, on the road, she want to go home. She got those special shoes on that keeps her walking. Because she's killed one of the witches. And on the way, the first thing she comes upon is a scarecrow. A scarecrow that is meant, because it's not the scarecrow that's stupid, it's the crow that thinks the scarecrow is real that's stupid. So it's not the person that's stupid, it's the people that perceive you as being stupid. All he wants is a brain. He said, well, I want to go home. If the Wiz can help me go home, I'm sure the Wiz can give you a brain. And then they follow the yellow brick road, path of Ma'at, righteousness, justice, reciprocity. And who do they come upon? The Tin Man, or Nipsey Russell. That's the Wiz. And they meet this Tin Man, and the Tin Man, all he wants is a heart. He wants to be able to feel. He wants to be able to feel, because he can't feel because he's made of tin. Scarecrow can get me home, can get you a brain. I'm sure that Wiz can give you a heart. Follow the yellow brick road. Come upon the lion. The lion wants courage. Now, we know that courage is symbolized by the lion. Courage, power, majesty, royalty. He wants courage. Because they found him out when the dog jumped on his case. Not too much courage there, but you're supposed to be courageous. You're afraid of a little dog named Total. The Total. But we're going to get back to Total down the road. We're going to find out why that little dog had the answer to the whole problem. Little black dog too, huh? So everything happens. They get to the castle, and the Wiz comes across as this majestic symbol on the wall. Can't see him, just an image, just an illusion. They all get scared. First one out the door is the lion. Everybody else follows. But the bottom line comes is that she is supposed to be able to get the other witches, she's supposed to kill the witch, and the only way to prove that you killed the witch is to take a broom. Her shoes that help her walk, her broom that helps her fly, is what you can do in order to go home, get a brain, get a heart, get your courage. Now, you know, my first question to the Wiz was, well, if you Wiz, you should be able to do all this yourself. Why you need us, who lost, don't have no sense, don't have a heart, don't have no courage? Why are you dependent on us to defeat the one person standing in your way to being the Führer of Oz? Not the Wizard of Oz, because he was after being the Führer of Oz. Long story short, they get the broom, they go back, and here's total. Here comes the Wiz, projecting himself as this big illusion on the wall. And here's Total, the little black dog. Little black. Gonna pull the curtain back. And everybody sees what's supposed to be a huge, magnificent person as a little bitty man by the name of Richard Pryor. Comedian. Jokester. The Wiz goes about explaining to the individuals, well, Scarecrow, you were the one that devised the plan, so you have a brain. Automatically, he starts doing all these mathematical calculations in his head. He tells the Tin Man, you were the one that was willing to give your life out, so you had a heart. And Lion, you the one that defended everybody at the end, so you always had courage. So they get into this hot air balloon. Hot air is a very special symbol, particularly with this Führer of Oz inside, who's about to come up, and all of a sudden, Dorothy neglects to get in. They're going back to Kansas, land of Barack Obama. They miss it though. And she crying. Now out of the heavens comes Lena Horne. And what does she do? She sings a song. Believe in yourself. Dorothy, all you had to do was flick your heels 3 times and say, I want to go home. And you'd have been home. Isn't this what we're telling our brothers and sisters out on the block all the time? They're telling you you're illiterate in school, yet you have devised the #1 economical system in the world known as rap music. You invented it, selling your cassette tapes out of the back of your cars on 174th Street and Weeks Avenue in the Bronx. All praises to our brother, African Bombay. And to Cool Herc. And to Pee Wee Reese. Grandmaster Plans. Melly Mel. This is the origins of rap. We try to talk to our young people about this. See, this is not rap music. Rap music ended in 1985. Gangster and sex rap started from 1985 to 2005. What we're dealing right now is chaos, waiting for order. Because I'm not far from my son, who is 14 years old, who got this album, Jim Jones, Paul Mob. Y'all know what I'm talking about. Lil Wayne, making much money, but don't have sense enough not to have drugs, guns, and a license that don't work in his car while he drives. He making all this money, but he driving with a gun and drugs. You know, Alton Maddox often says the difference between a smart criminal and a stupid criminal is stupid criminals get caught. So I'm not advertising anybody to be a smart criminal. I'm just saying if you're going to be a criminal, be smart. So we are people living in the land of Oz, looking for a brain, hoping for a heart, and trying to have courage, and all we want to do is go home We are walking geniuses with hearts of gold and courage that cannot be beat, and we're already walking in our house that we call the planet Earth. Yet, we are not conscious of this consciousness. And this is something we must start a curriculum for our children. And that's what I come to talk to you about. Because this curriculum is extremely real. And none of this curriculum is new. It's been here. Carter G. Woodson talked to us about it. You can even go back to Martin Delaney. He talked to us about it. That brother was dropping facts on melanin. We know this. We've had brothers who have come to us constantly and consistently. And if you want to know a brother that was absolutely genius, that people flocked to Harlem in the early 1900s just to stand on the corner and listening to this brilliant brother, just study the life of Hubert Harrison. Hubert Harrison, probably a name that many of us don't speak of yet. This brother was one of the phenomenal philosophers of the world. Not just black folk came to hear him, white folk came to hear him. He was a genius. Earlier speaking of Charles Drew, Jan Metzinger, all of our brothers and sisters who have come before us, we have to understand this, we're already home, this curriculum is already here. What's not making it happen is that we are in the land of Oz listening to the Fuhrer of Oz, telling us who we are and what we are, and not realizing that once you shut that voice and start to listen to your ancestors that are housed in your body, going back to the origins of humanity, you carry the DNA structure of every one of your past ancestors from the origins of life in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania to this very day. Not just your grandparents and your great-grandparents. You have the DNA structure of the original human being. And the original human being was called into being, if you want to get into certain amino acids, because this is where people teach us about the ACGT, adenine, right? Guanine, cytosine, and cytosine and the T is thymine, the T, ACGT. That is the voice of God. That's what organized all this on earth. This is chemistry. This is why we need to understand chemistry. We need to understand biochemistry, biology, chemistry. Our young people sitting in their classrooms have to understand biology, chemistry, and physics as it applies through our eyes. I have no problem looking at the world through European eyes, if you're European. That's your business. But I, as an African, have a right, not a man-given right, but a God-given right, to find the God within me. And I can only do that if I look at the God through my own eyes, realizing that I am that God, having this human experience. And as educators, as parents, when we're sitting in these classrooms, we have to come into the classroom with this knowledge and then begin to facilitate a learning experience in that classroom that our children can understand who they are in this world, where they are in this world, and how in the world did you get it. But also, where in the world do you have to go? And what in the world were you divinely destined to do? You cannot do this as long as white supremacy reigns supreme on this planet. So you must murder white intellectual superiority. Come on, understand what I'm saying? Because I'm not talking about any human murder. I'm talking about intellectual murder, because Nana before tells us miseducation is invisible mental violence. He called it menticide. We are murdering our minds. in our classrooms. We are taking away our ability to see ourselves. We have to understand that the principles of melanin tell us that, according to Glosier's law, but according to natural law, for life to come into existence as it did on the planet, it would have to have come in a hot climate. In a hot climate, the reaction of the sun to the carbon atom is what kicks into being what we consider to be the process of melanation. Carbon. Carbon is one of 4 major atoms in our world. Sulfur is important too, but the major ones, basically, oxygen, nitrogen, hydrogen. But John G. Jackson, in Introduction to Civilization, teaches us that you can only put no more than 4 of these together in order to create something. You can put 2 parts hydrogen, 1 part oxygen, have H2O, have water. You can put 2 parts hydrogen, 2 parts oxygen together, you have hydrogen peroxide. But you can't put no more than 4 of those together in order to make something happen. Once you introduce carbon, carbon is a sticky atom. It is a magical atom. It is black magic. It is the foundations of chem mystery that allow you and allow the world to develop the millions upon millions of molecules that exist, because carbon is what brings millions of atoms and elements together in order to create the many millions of molecules that we have. Carbon is so bad, it can bind with itself. Carbon, if extracted, is a black substance taken from the cosmic universe that is black. Stars come from, according to Dr. Richard King, what he calls nanodiamonds. Nanodiamonds in the cosmos is the coming together, the forcing together down into one deep, strong, hard, heavy, black magic that explodes and creates a star. That same concept happens on Earth when you take carbon and you crush it down, put it under pressure, and it explodes, crystallizes, and becomes a diamond. For human beings, you take a human being, black in nature, put it under pressure, and it will explode into an African American. The star, the masterpiece of the cosmic reality. Now, I'm not saying this to make us feel that we're more than we really are. I'm saying it because if you are conscious of your consciousness, if you know who you are, the sky is not the limit. You can go beyond all things ever imagined if you just can imagine yourself as God having a human experience. But as long as you're kneeling down, or standing up, or doing anything that is worshiping the greatest thing than yourself, outside of yourself, you will never know yourself, because how can you look for God where God is not? Because God is in you. You are God. And how then could you understand God in the universe if you don't see that how you treat other people is how you treat God? How you treat the least of these is how you treat God. Even if you pass a brother or sister on the street who may not have much, asking you for something, even if you don't have much and don't have anything to give them, you could at least say, have a nice day. Can't help you today because I need some help myself. But if ever I got a little something and I pass your way again, I'll drop it to you. But have a nice day. Because even if I don't have something to give you physically, I can at least give you the word. We must understand that humanity was born, nurtured, and raised, cultured, civilized, educated in Africa And as Dr. Clark taught us, after Africans got their show together, then they took it on the road. And because of the climate, as they traveled north of the Hapi, or the Nile River, they began to create civilizations that if you do not have it, I encourage you, get the DVD on Nubia, that is the Master of Ceremonies, Dr. Leonard Jeffries. That's a very good DVD. Get that DVD. Because one of the missing links in understanding Kemet or Egypt is the fact that we don't quite understand Kush, Meroe, Napata. Because when you don't see the missing link, you skip, and then you can believe that people from outer space came down and built the pyramid. Because when you don't believe in yourself, you can fall for something. And so Africans traveled through the countries that we today would call Kenya, traveling north into Ethiopia, that we call it geographically Ethiopia, going through Ethiopia to Sudan, Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea. And in Kemet, these Africans found a unique climate that allowed them to build forever. Very dry. The Sahara had already begun to become a desert, and they found it that they could build. And these Africans looked at the heavens and understood that they could chart the earth by the heavens. So sisters who invented mathematics, brothers didn't do it, sisters did it. All praise to our sisters, because necessity is the mother of invention, and there's no reason why a man needs to count. There's no natural reason for a man to count. For women who are going through a natural cycle of life, it demands on them eventually that they prepare for this cycle, and in so doing, begin the concept of counting, which is the beginning of numbers, which is the beginning of mathematics, which is numbers. It's called number sense in the Board of Education. Makes sense. Makes sense. Because nature, if you ever have a question about anything, just look to nature. You get sick, don't feel good, look at a dog. Dog don't go to the doctor. You may bring him to the vet, but the doctor don't say, yo man, I'm not feeling good. Can you take it to the doctor? Doctor, eat grass, drink water, and rest. Gets better. We go out, take all this medicine, get sicker, sometimes die, and we say, well, I have coverage. You know, there's something wrong with us fighting for medical coverage. Psychologically, if you fight for medical coverage, it means people plan on keeping you sick. See, I want to go to Dr. Sabi, Dr. Africa, Sister Ma'a. I want to go to people who will prevent me from getting sick and not cure me once I'm sick and damn near dying. Something wrong with full coverage. These Africans, perfecting their craft, traveling along happy, build situations that allow them to chart the heavens. We once again thank our sisters for inventing science, because the foundations of science is astronomy. Sisters going through this cycle, this 28, 29, 30-day cycle, looked up into the heavens and noticed that there was a celestial body that also went through this 28, 29, 30-day cycle. And as she prepared for her cycle, she looked at the lunar cycle, and that is why every calendar, no matter how many years it may be, even the 26,000-year calendar, the great year, developed by Africans. In Africa, by the way, there's a place called Nabta Playa that shows you that Africans were aware of a 26,000-year cycle. There were 12 houses that lasted somewhere approximately for 2,160 years. And there were 12 of them. Multiplying that out, if my math is right, 25,920 years, and what they did is they just evened it off by giving it 26,000 years. That evidence is found in Naphtha Playa, west of Aswan. By the way, don't believe anything I say. Check it out for yourself. I think the most important thing that we could ever do is to come before us and not speak to you for the end result for you to believe me, but to encourage you, excite you, and get you motivated to study this for yourself, because the results that you come to are going to be different than the results I came to. And we need to have think tanks that can talk about this, and these become the foundations of our educational institution of what we call the Per Ankh that meets on Thursdays in Harlem every Thursday at 7 o'clock. Because you see, like Attorney Alton Maddox, he wasn't waiting for no one to start a freedom retreat. 14 years ago, brother started it for himself. You know, I admire folk. See, my mother used to, again, I always go back to my mother, because my mother was my Hatshepsut, philosopher, African queen. And she used to always prepare me for what was to come. And even if it wasn't there, just prepare yourself when the door opens, you'll be ready. And she never allowed me to come to her with a complaint or a problem if I didn't have a solution. She said, you know, you can come to me with any complaint you want, but just have a solution to your problem. Don't come to me with no problem, I don't want to hear it. But if you have a solution, I'll think about it, maybe we'll talk about it, maybe we can solve the problem. And so I've always been, and when, I got hit, I thought I was hit. Okay, I'm dealing with Hatshepsut here, and here I am, little King Tut, thinking I'm all that. So eventually I go to her now with a problem and a solution. She said, what's the solution? I give her a solution. She said, interesting. Now go out and find me 3 more to say the same thing. Because now she wanted me to be well-rounded in my solution. Not just one solution. What's your plan A, B, C, and D? Because see, sometimes in our quickness to do great things, we normally only have one solution and no backup plan. You're going to have a backup plan, alternatives that you can go. You know, Bob Marley say it's a smart warrior who run away to come back and fight another day. Yes. So that's important that we understand this and put these kind of plans in place. This African, according to Drusilla Dunjee Houston, in her book Wonderful Ethiopians and Their Kushite Empires, then says that these Africans then traveled across east, north, west, and into Europe, but she focuses on the ones that go northeast. And she comes up with a people that are in countries that we today geographically call, well, today we call it Israel. Yesterday we called it Palestine. The day before that it was the African land we call Canaan. Now I gotta tell you this, because for those of you who haven't been here the last time I say this, I always say this, be careful whose side you take in this conflict, in the illusion of the Middle East. Because it's important to understand that the Palestinians are the descendants of the Philistines who were the murderers of the Canaanites. You shall reap what you sow. You said God told you to kill all these Africans, and now there's a people on that land saying God told me to kill you. Now if African folk get in the middle of this argument, we're going to get killed. So I caution us, be careful whose side you take. And also as African folk, we have to know the difference between a friend and an ally. And a lot of times we make mistakes with our friends and allies. Because see, we think our allies are our friends. Allies are people you align yourself with to get a job done. Once the job is done, they very well could turn into your enemy. But if you keep looking them at a friend, then you're going to get yourself in trouble. And so the bottom line is to know the difference between an ally and a friend. And to deal with friends as friends and allies as allies. When the job gets done, we don't hold hands and sing songs. In the countries we today call Lebanon, ancient land of Phoenicia, where the capital Byblos is where Greeks went to get paper. And they rewrote the books that they had plagiarized from their African teachers, the Kemites or the Egyptians. They rewrote books like the Book of the Dead, the Pyramid Text, the Coffin Text, the Bremerin Papyrus, the Osirian Drama, and they wrote it in Greek. And they named the book, or the book came to be known, named after the capital where they got the paper. So now we have a book that we call the Bible, not realizing it comes from the word Biblos, which was the capital of Phoenicia, where the Greeks who stole the legacy rewrote African books. So don't be surprised when Cain and Abel sounds like Asar and Satan. Don't be surprised when Genesis sounds like the origins of life, the primate of the essence is coming out of the Shabbat stone. Don't be surprised when the prodigal son sounds like the destruction of the African community by the son that came home. Don't be surprised when you hear stories like Psalm 104 that sounds so much like the Aten text, adoration of the sun. Because all of these books, whether you're dealing with any, from agnostic to Zoroastrianism, from A to Z, not one spiritual thought was born in a mind other than an African mind. As it traveled the world, environment changed its structure, changed its form, but the structure remained the same. To the point that we even now speak of a Christ, not realizing that the word is kares. Ka means spirit, res means to rise. Kares, Christ, for the spirit to rise or resurrect itself. And that is why George G.M. James says that the purpose of life is soul salvation, to resurrect your soul, to make it live for all times. That's the purpose. And the road to that allows you to become conscious of your soul or your ba that unites with your ka, that then joins the greater ancestor or God, the collective unconscious, the collection of all thought and presence in the universe. They went from Lebanon to Assyria, from Assyria to what we call Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan. See, you would have to ask yourself, why are they so interested in Afghanistan? Do they really want to go after that man that's been dead about 5 years? Or do they really want to surround Iran? Because if you got Iraq and you got Afghanistan, go to The Art of War by another African, Sun Tzu. Surround your enemy. Cut off his links. From Afghanistan, they went to Pakistan. From Pakistan, these Africans went to India, created the great civilizations that we know as Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, created a number system that they had invented from the Ethiopian that brought it in there. The general by the name of Ganges, and that's why the major river is called the Ganges River. They went across into China, and they went into Korea, north and south, into Vietnam. But in South Korea, these Africans brought some South Koreans onto the island to their east, met a short African people known as the Ainu people, and they created the people we today call the Japanese. These are things we don't know. And yes, it is unfortunate. Because we did this before Europeans, who were Africans, who depigmented themselves in the Ice Age, had returned south approximately 2000 BC. The European as we know him and her today is not a mutation of African people. No. The peoples of European descent that we know today are a people born of the people that we call Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon, found in Monaco, is a people, and in fact, if you read the African origins, the African presence in Europe, edited by Dr. Ivan van Sertima, you'll read an article in there by Charles Finch and LeGrand Clay that talk about this, and about what they found in Monaco. And they found in Monaco, they came up with human bones. They were trying to build a building, and the leader of, who I believe was the father of the man that married Grace, Prince Rainier, his father, Prince Albert of Monaco, I believe that was his father or grandfather, they were doing excavation, came upon these bones, and they stopped the digging. And what they did is that they brought experts in history, archaeology, anthropology in, because they knew these bones were very special bones. And so in researching these bones, they came upon the fact that these people were a very unique people. These were different from the Europeans of France and Italy and Monaco and things like that. They were different people. In fact, they were like a blend of African Eurasian, very different from what they call the European today. And so they continued, and they went into something known as the Grotto des Enfants, which means the children's cave. And in the children's cave, what they did is they came down and they were able to dig 12 layers down into the earth. And on the top layers, they found the same people they found in this other place, the Cro-Magnon, mixture of both African and Eurasian, body type, blood type. But when they went down 9 layers, they came upon a people totally different from the people on top. So much so, they renamed them after the family, and they called it Grimaldi. Grimaldi was an African human that brought what is known as the Aurignacian tool-making culture. Whoever civilized Europe brought this Aurignacian tool-making culture into Europe, and it was said to be these Grimaldis, 9 stratified layers underneath. You're talking about thousands and thousands of years prior to the people found on top. So the Grimaldi is all African, pure African. Cro-Magnon is a mixture of the pigmentation of this African over the stratified 1,000-year layers that landed on top. The Cro-Magnon, in being exposed to the sun, not only depigmented itself over the thousands of years that it was exposed to extreme cold. See, we think it's cold. Ice Age, I once did a presentation on melanin in a Catholic college. And the professor of anthropology and whatever else, he was a specialist, and came to me and said, you know, you're exaggerating. When you say that the Ice Age, the temperatures went down to 2,000 degrees below zero, you're exaggerating. I said, well, in your interpretation, in your research, how cold do you think it went? He said it didn't go no lower than 1,200 degrees below zero. I said, well, that's cold. So 2,000, 1,200 is cold, man. So I don't, okay, good, thank you. Thank you for your information. I won't say 2,000 no more. I'll say 1,200, particularly when I see people like you. So it was cold in this Ice Age. 4 Ice Ages that we can clock. Starting about 1.75 million years ago, you have the Gunst, the Mindel, the Riss, and the Worm. Dr. Sheikh Anta Diop tells us that we do not have to be worried too much about the other 3 because humanity, African humanity, had not ventured into Europe up until the mid-Worm Ice Age when there was an interstadial, and this interstadial was a warming period that Africans moved in, and then all of a sudden, from Greenland, where all ice ages emerged, this ice age covered the cap, the north cap of our world, and it locked Africans into this area because ice in water rises, and it created ice mountains that did not allow Africans to return south. It only made them go into caves and put on clothes. And in so doing, it disconnected the relationship between the sun and the human, which is the primary reason why vitamin D. You have something on your skin known as 7-hydrocholesterol. That when the sun touches your skin, you have 4 types of vitamin D. 1, 2, 3, 4. See, this is the curriculum now. See, we know we're talking science here now. We're talking biology, this is what I mean when I say the African-centered curriculum doesn't have to have the word Africa every other word. It just has to have an African perspective. So, vitamin D1 and D2 is a inactive form of vitamin D in your body. When the sun hits it, the 7-hydrocholesterol acts with the vitamin D1, D2, activates it, pulls it down into your skin, and that's what creates vitamin D4 that is actually what nourishes your body and allows and acts as a merchant of transfer of calcium throughout your body that allows your body to function. D3, D4. D1, D2. When the sun hits the skin, this particular chemical, this biochemical that you have that's called 7-hydrocholesterol is active. It starts a process of transferring an inactive vitamin D1, 2 into an active D3, D4 and starts the process of life in your skin that pulls it down and nourishes it, and through the constant reaction, it then pulls it into your body, sends the melanin to your muscles, sends it to your liver, sends it to your pancreas, sends it through your blood system, sends it to the neuromelanin in your brain, sends it to your toenail, sends it throughout your body, and your body starts to animate itself. In Europe, when this did not happen, this relationship didn't happen, the body had to compensate for being able to get the little bit of sunlight to create the vitamin D. And before they used to put the vitamin D in milk, what the body did naturally was to begin to depigment itself to allow the little bit of sunlight to be able to get into the body. However, in this process, it also suffocated the spiritual life of this human by calcifying the pineal gland. Dr. Richard King talks about it. Pineal gland looks like pine. He made a comparison between a calcified pineal gland and a healthy pineal gland, and the difference is that it's equivalent. The same relationship of a calcified to a healthy is a raisin to a grape. A raisin is hard. It's actually a grape that's had its life system sucked out of it. And it stays there as a hard, calcified gland that can't dance, can't sing, got to go American Bandstand, stay away from Soul Train. This is reality. Your inability to dance means you are not one with your environment. In fact, black folk, we used to have a dance back in the day. We used to call it the Patty Duke. And the Patty Duke was our dance mimicking Europeans. And to tell you how bad black folk are, we dance off beat better than they do. We are a great people. We just don't understand our flavor, and because of that, we don't understand why they fear us. And because of that, we put ourselves in harm's way, because we put our guard down. I love us. And the more I study our history, the more in love I fall with us, because we are a great people. We have put up with a lot of stuff, and despite and in spite of that, still we rise. And you know, but it's more than just an applause, it's more than a feeling. You have to walk the earth knowing this. You come from royalty. You come, and not the royalty that you're born into, the royalty that perseveres against all injustice. As Brother Reverend Clemson Brown said earlier when Alton warned us last year what was going to happen. None of us should have at that point wondered what was going to happen. The prophet spoke. Because he's a historian. Dr. Clark would tell us, I'm surprised that you're surprised. This calcified pineal gland coming back down created a law that we call xenophobia. It became fearful of everything other than itself, and it began to inbreed. In other words, Cro-Magnon with Cro-Magnon. Cro-Magnon with Cro-Magnon. Wouldn't go with anything else. Only with itself. And because of that, what we today call the European reform. And that is the result of the Cro-Magnon inbreeding. So Europeans are not mutations of Africans. They're mutations of mutations. They are mutated mutations. Because I was looking just a moment ago, I have pictures of this gorilla called Snowflake. An albino gorilla. Died of melanoma. That gorilla would not mate with another albino gorilla. The gorilla knew, Snowflake knew, that if I mate with an albino female gorilla, I am working my descendants off the globe. An albino peacock will not mate with an albino peacock. An albino cockroach will not mate with an albino cockroach. Even an albino plant won't mate with another albino plant. Yet free will, the power of negation, allowed this masterpiece of our God to say no. The first thing that every Cro-Magnon should have done when it left the mountains of Europe should have found the largest, blackest individual and mate with that individual in order to keep itself in the evolutionary. Be careful, brothers and sisters. They always talk about black men are extinct. We are not. They are. Whenever they tell you, you something, just look in the mirror. We are not. And if you don't believe me, go to a book written by Patrick Buchanan. Minister Louis Farrakhan, during one of his Savior addresses, told us to make sure that we read this book. And this book talks about, even Patrick Buchanan understands what's for the future. For every one of them, and he talks about, although I would disagree with him, he talks about for every European born, one is, for every European dying, one is not born. That's not accurate. For every one of them that dies, 6 are not born. That's why they need this test tube thing. And also, this is why they have this promiscuity. That's why they like this Britney Spears. And they like all these women that take their clothes off because they are willing to have white children come into the world any way they can get it. And they don't have no problem with getting people just buck wild crazy, going to their lower passions, having all these children, because the only individual that can bring into the world a European child is a European female.
Why did they kill them so much doing witch hunts?
Say again?
Why did they kill them doing the witch hunts?
Well, the witch hunts were based on the fact that, you got to look at, and we're going to get into the Moors, but I need someone that's 10, 12 now. Please tell me how much time, because I could go all night, because you know how I get. So please give me a signal when I should be winding things. Give me at least maybe 15 minutes, because I need time to, when you exercise, you warm up, but you got to warm down. And once I get started, I'll be warming down on my way home, and I don't want to be driving, warming down from this situation. Not UAM. So the whole idea of the witch hunts, when you look at it, you look at the role of the Moors coming to America. Read a book called Othello's Children by Jose V. Pimento Bay. He wrote a book called Othello's Children. And what happened was, and understand the role of this so-called St. Patrick of Ireland, because St. Patrick really was the one that drove the Druids, the African priesthood and priesthood out of Ireland and Europe. And how did he do it? He was stepping on a snake. And the snake is a feminine principle for authority, and that's why in Kemet you have the Uraeus, Irta, the cobra, and the vulture, Mut. Mut, the root word of mother. The feminine principle of royalty is a feminine principle. Aset is a throne. And that's why you have the child, Heru or Jesus, sitting on Mary's lap or Aset's lap, because it is the man that ascends royalty by sitting on a throne which is feminine. The queen makes the king. The king don't make the queen. This is a legacy from Africa, where we as men are very comfortable with this. See, but when you're bit by the vampire, you start acting like the vampire. So when the African woman brought in royalty of the woman into Europe, the patriarchal system coming out of the symbolism of Saint Patrick, came the patriarchal system of stepping on the snake and crushing the power of the female. However, Africans had brought this concept of women right, mother right across the globe. And one place they happened to come was Massachusetts. And when they got to Massachusetts, they built a town that they called Peace, Salam, or we call it Salem. When these European men got off Plymouth Rock, came to this part of the world and saw how women were treated, they said, oh no, we're going to kill these women. Because these women don't have power over us and we're going to rule. So it became a place where they did witch hunts. And if women stood up to men, you were burning tonight. Because women must be submissive to men, according to the European. I'm afraid of a submissive woman. Because a submissive woman ain't gonna make me a man. I need a woman that's gonna tell me, brother, I don't think you're on the right track. Oh, come on, let's sit down and talk about this. See, that's what an African man, comfortable in his masculinity. See, we gotta be comfortable in our masculinity. Because if we're not, we're gonna fall for anything. And it's not that we want women up, ahead, or behind. We want them beside. And I believe that's all sisters want. They don't want to pedestal. They don't want to walk behind. They want to walk beside. And if you look at the Kemetic messages in the statues, it's funny how Europeans interpret this, and Eurasians in general, because a lot of times the feminine principle is smaller than the male, but she has her hands around his knees. The largest, most powerful man, if you ever wanted to bring him down, how do you bring him down? You bring him by the back of the knees. So that sister, symbolically behind the knees, is showing to this brother, I got your back. They will not get you from the back, because I got you covered. This is the power of symbolism. But looking at this symbol from another set of eyes, you see man big, woman small, man important, women not important. And that becomes a great challenge for us when we're looking at these concepts. So we look at the empire of the Moors. We have to understand the empire of the Moors. But the way to do that is to look at a course. And what I'd like to talk about is the book list about the Moors. It's a very simple book list. Simple, I mean I don't list a lot of books, but I list important, very simple but concise and clear books. And one book to read is The African Presence in Early Europe, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. And the second book is The Golden Age of the Moors, edited by Dr. Ivan Van Sertima. But to do this, you have to break the book up, because what's interesting is that a curriculum, when you develop it, it's not about sitting down and just reading a book. It's almost like shuffling a deck of cards. There are certain chapters that go with certain chapters, and there are certain concepts that are there that you study. So sometimes it may make you go into one book on one chapter and another book in another. So a curriculum allows you to do this. And the first lesson that you want to look at when you're understanding this is the creation of the European. Because before you can even talk about Africans in Europe, you have to understand who the European was that this African met. Because the African, in medieval times, when he went into Europe and he saw this depigmented African, he said, who are you? He said, you look like you've been scared by a ghost. Because it was so different from himself, but he knew it was him, but in another state. So the question becomes, what is it that you should know about the origins of life, the moving into the northern climates, the depigmentation process, and the role of melanin? You then would look at the race and origins of Africans in early Europe. You would go to the African presence in early Europe, and you would read the introduction, Race and Evolution in Prehistory by Charles Finch, the evolution of the Caucasoid by Charles Finch, and then LeGrand Clay talks about the First Invaders. Give you sort of kind of like a overview. You would look at the introduction by Ivan van Sertima, Race and Evolution in Prehistory. All of these come out of the African presence in early Europe. Race and Evolution in Prehistory, and the evolution of the Caucasoid, or the Caucasoid by Charles Finch. You then would go to the next article by LeGrand Clay. It's entitled The First Invaders. The question that you ask yourself before you move on is, how did life, human life, emerge from Africa and migrate to Europe? From there, the third topic would be the origins of Africans in Europe. You would go to the African presence in early Europe, and you would read the article by Ivan van Sertima entitled The Definitional Problem. Very interesting problem that we have in understanding this. And once you read this, I'm telling you, if you should take it, that you say, you know something, I don't believe a word Brother Cobb said, but I'm going to get these books he talked about, and I'm going to read them. You would come forward with an understanding of who you are and who they are that would allow you to sustain your life from now until the day you transition out in a whole new way of looking at yourself.
You say the definition of problem?
The Definitional Problem is the title of an essay written by Ivan van Sertima in the African presence in early Europe. You then would go to an article by Don Luke. It's entitled African Presence in the Early History of the British Isles and Scandinavia. Now that's a whole nother discussion. Because these are concepts that we very rarely ever think about. Next article by LeGrand Clay. Now you're going to look at the mystery of the Arctic Twa, the little short-statured African found in the Arctic Circle. Don Luke, the African presence in the early history of the British Isles and Scandinavia. LeGrand Clay, in African presence early Europe, has an essay, The Mystery of the Arctic Twa. Runoko Rashidi then follows with a review of the book by McRitchie, David McRitchie, entitled Ancient and Modern Britain. And then the article, Blacks in Pre-Revolutionary Russia. Where he talks about the importance of somebody like, well, first he deals with his grandfather, Abraham Hannibal. So you got to understand who Hannibal is. Abraham Hannibal. See, because when you study a person, if you study their lineage, you understand a lot more about them.
Of course, his grandfather.
Say again?
Of course, his grandfather.
Yes, yes. Okay? Because Pushkin now is going to come out of the lineage of Abraham Hannibal.
Right.
Okay? Pushkin, who did for the Russian, because at this time, the people of Russia were speaking French.
Yeah.
Remember Gaul?
Right.
See, this is where history comes in, if you understand history. And what happened was, is someone like Pushkin comes in and does to the Russian language what Shakespeare did to the English language. He gives it syntax and grammar. He makes a common sense of it so people can express themselves in a way that is understandable by the masses of people. Pushkin was honored in Russia. And then the final person that's honored, although he's a New Yorker, he revolutionizes drama. The New Yorker, he revolutionizes drama in Russia and in Europe. Ira Aldrich, one of the premier actors of Othello.
Yeah.
And what the Russians said about him when they would observe his play, he said, when Europeans come here, when actors come here, they get into their part and they act the part. They said of Ira Aldrich, when he comes in, he takes himself and becomes the part. And so it's not acting. It's just being who he was. He revolutionized acting in Russia. And when Ira used to go to Europe, guess who he used to hang out with? Alexander Dumas, another brother. In France. Okay? Alexander Dumas, another family lineage.
Yeah.
Brother Thomas. Thomas Alexander Dumas was son to. If you want to get to world's great men of color, there are essays on these three. Grandpère, père, and fils. Grandfather, father, and son. Thomas Dumas, French nobleman, comes to Haiti, marries Marie Dumas, has a child, Thomas. Mother dies. Father takes Alexander to France, gives him the best of everything, but he remarries. Thomas gets upset. He renounces his father. He takes on his mother's name, and it becomes Dumas, because that's his mother's name. Mother Wright took his mother's name. Became one of the fiercest warriors, and there are people who believe Dumas was the one that opened up Egypt in 1797 for what Napoleon III would do later. Napoleon was jealous and fearful of Dumas because they said Dumas was so big and strong, he would pick a man up when he was on his horse, pick him up and fling him in the air.
Pick the horse up too.
That's what they said, to pick the horse up too. But that's how big he was. This man, Napoleon Bonaparte, was intimidated by Dumas. So what he does is that as the lead general, he sends Dumas back. But in sending him back, he warns the enemy where Dumas is going. They capture Dumas, keep him in prison 4 years. In that 4 years, Napoleon returns back to France, becomes emperor. There is word that if Dumas had gotten back first, he would have been the emperor of France. Thomas Dumas gives birth to Alexander Dumas. Alexander Dumas, in honoring his father, writes a book entitled The Three Musketeers. But his father is not one of the Three Musketeers. His father is D'Artagnan, who was said to fight upwards of 3 men a day and beat him. That's how bad he was. D'Artagnan is Dumas. The Three Musketeers is a symbol, and this is why in the beginning you see D'Artagnan fighting. Okay? But don't get caught up in Dumas, because there's another brother, Chevalier St. George, who is the greatest fencer of France, elder to Dumas now. He's an elder to Dumas, Thomas Dumas. Not only is he the top fencer of Europe, he is also the #1 violinist in Europe. And let me just throw this on you. You know George Edward Tate? He wrote a poem called The Black Brigade. Did it on the internet. He wrote that over 30 years ago. The Quiet Lion, I call it. Brother got all them dreads and tall and big. Wonderful brother, brilliant brother. He wrote a poem called The Black Brigade, and when I read this, I often thought about, because Chevalier St. George and Alexander Dumas was dispatched from France to go to the Caribbean and round up African French men to come back and fight in the revolution. And when they were not fighting and winning, they were a musical band.
Fight in the American
Fight? No, in the French Revolution.
Oh, okay.
French Revolution. Okay?
And when they weren't fighting, they were a musical band. And I've often thought of the Black Brigade. When you read the Black Brigade, you'll understand what I'm saying if you haven't read it. Now this is Chevalier St. George. Now, Chevalier St. George, #1 fencer. Alexander Dumas, said to be #1 fencer. They made an agreement. We ain't fighting. Because that means one of us got to win. Like the Williams sisters. When they play tennis, somebody got to win. Well, with Chevalier St. George and Dumas, Dumas gave deference and respect to his elder, Chevalier St. George, and said, look, you can remain the best fencer. I'll take second place out of respect for your eldership. This was an African tradition that these brothers brought into Europe. We don't know this about ourselves. The other brother, when you're looking at the arts of Europe coming from Africa, in medieval Europe, you can't forget Goethe. Goethe, said to be one of the greatest poets and writers, was a black man. Mozart's teacher was a black man named Suleiman. Beethoven, Ludwig van Beethoven. He has a plaque in front of his house, not just in Vienna, Austria, but in Bonn, Germany, and it says Schwarze Spaniera. The Black Spaniard's house. Because he was a Moor that left Spain. Family went to Holland. From Holland went to Germany, and the musical side of the family then moved to Vienna, Austria, to make sure that Ludwig could stay close to Amadeus Mozart, Wolfgang. And what's interesting is just look at his name. See, because the brother knew he wasn't going to survive in Europe with a name like Thovin Bey. So what he did is he took the Bey from the end, put it in the front, put an E instead of the Y, and it became, because we don't call him Beethoven, we call him Beethoven. His Moorish nature is right in his name, and we don't see it. This is our history. He revolutionized. Let me tell you something else to do. See, these are all things that I'd like you to actively do once you leave this area. I want you to go and I want you to listen to either Oscar Peterson or Thelonious Monk and Beethoven. Listen to them all and see how close they sound. Listen to Moonlight Sonata. Listen to the Ninth Symphony. And then go to Oscar Peterson. Or go to Thelonious Monk and listen to Straight No Chaser. And then go to Miles Davis and listen to the horn. Miles Davis wrote in his autobiography that was written also by Quincy Troupe, he wrote a piece where he talked about when he wrote a piece that was dedicated to the Moors. He has a whole album dedicated to the Moors. John Coltrane, who became part of the Moorish Science Temple, he has a piece called Olé. Okay? And both of these were impacted by the Moors in Spain. And there's a conversation that Miles Davis is having, where what he did is he took the cantatas of Spain, the voices that he heard females sing on the verandas, and he turned the horn into their voices. Sketches of Spain, thank you, brother. Because you must have read my mind. I was searching for that title. Sketches of Spain by Miles Davis. Listen to it, download it, whatever you need to do. But understand your greatness, because all that is in them is in you. There is nothing that was in them that's not in you. Collectively, we are the libraries. Some people want to call it the Akashic Field, the Akashic Records, which is a collective record of all things that have happened in the universe, are happening in the universe, and will ever happen in the universe. And you have access to that information if only you would touch the right button or tap your heels 3 times and say, I want to go home. It's there. It is there. And this is no hocus pocus mumbo jumbo. It's there. Access it in your quiet time. Pull it down. When you go on and you start looking at Africans in the ancient Mediterranean Isles, and mainland Greece. That will then tell you about how George G.M. James could have written Stolen Legacy, and why Martin Bernal, although it had an agenda, he was right in Black Athena. And also why Frank Snowden, when he wrote his book on blacks or Africans in Greco-antiquity, he was right.
What about Stonehenge?
Stonehenge. Stonehenge from Britain, from the island. Well, it's in Scotland, Wales, England. It's in that island. Stonehenge is an African astronomical site, and it's important that we understand this and know this. And again, it goes to astronomical. National Geographic just had I think the month before, soon, they had an article dedicated to Stonehenge. Bring it down on the internet if you need to, because I don't think they have it out anymore.
John Baldwin was Stonehenge.
Say again, brother?
John Baldwin. Prehistoric nations.
John Baldwin?
John D. Baldwin.
John D. Baldwin?
Prehistoric nations.
Prehistoric nations. See, because what I like to do here, this is all information gathering session.
Right on.
So if you got it, send it up here and I'll give it out there. Because I think what we have to do at this point is we have to get very scientific. And by science, I don't mean science as we know it. I mean consciousness, to become aware of this and to walk with this. And walk with this in knowledge of it so that every step you take, every step you make, carries this legacy with you. And then it goes to our children. And then after you look at Mediterranean Isles and mainland Greece, then you want to look at the Moors. And this is where we get into the golden age of the Moors. Who are the Moors and where did the Moors come from? You look at the articles in the Golden Age of the Moor and just read them through. But there's a particular one that talks about Othello that was written by Rosalind Johnson. In fact, I believe she's a teacher in Brooklyn. That's the bio information about her, and I tried to contact her, but what was so interesting is that Shakespeare Othello, based on the Moor, that they call the Moor. I purchased the DVD, the one that was played by Lawrence Fishburne. The recent one by Lawrence Fishburne. For the young people, I bought the DVD called O.
Yes, yes.
Okay, about a basketball. You know they're going to make it basketball. Bought O, and also I tapped into one of the most brilliant actors, Paul Robeson. But they don't have his visual, but they have it on DVD.
Okay.
But not just that, I also got William Marshall. And William Marshall is an actor,
Yeah.
Blackula.
Yeah, yeah.
Scream Blackula.
Yeah.
That brother brought Africa into Dracula. He out Dracula. I mean, because he brought the whole flair of his Othello into the character, because certainly that's who he was. Go into the beginning of that movie of Blackula, where he's there with that European count, and he disgraces and starts to disrespect the African woman. And William Marshall says, "You must be out of your mind." Of course, he's Dracula, so you know how that went.
He's the voice of God, too, in the Ten Commandments.
Say again?
Was he the voice of God in the Ten Commandments?
Was he? I'm not sure, but he very well could have been. But William Marshall, you know, these are people that we just don't tap into. William Marshall, in his role of Othello, was a very powerful. And you can buy that on DVD. They filmed him on DVD doing that.
He did Lydia Bailey also.
Say again?
He did Lydia Bailey.
Lydia Bailey. Okay. So you read Othello, but also read Rosalind Johnson, but also get an excerpt from Paul Robeson when he's discussing what he brought into the role as a conscious black man.
Right.
He was saying to walk in a spiritual life. You then look at the Moorish science, African faith systems in medieval Europe, dealing with Africans in the birth and expansion of Islam. Because you've got to understand, Muhammad comes from a line of African people. But not just that. The great majority of the people who instituted Islam came from the eastern coast of Ethiopia. That's why he sent his second adopted son, Bilal, to Ethiopia when he retreated to Medina the first time he was repulsed from Mecca. He went back to Medina where he was from, and he sent Bilal to Ethiopia and said, I'll call for you soon, son. Bring your boys with you when you come. And what happened when Muhammad, the prophet, was ready to return back to Mecca to take it over, he sent for Bilal, and Bilal returned with thousands of Ethiopians. What does that mean, 15 minutes, brother, or 10? 10. Came back with over 10,000 Africans from Ethiopia that had in place a faith system and a way to express it. The faith system became Islam, the way of peace. The people became Muslims, which are people of peace. And the language they expressed it today is called Arabic. Or Afro. Because you can't be Arabic and not be black. Because what makes you Arab is that fact that you're black. So, and I know there are times, just like sometimes people that follow particular faith systems, sometimes challenge. I say, I am more than willing to sidestep my opinion if you prove me wrong.
Right on.
But you've got to bring documentation.
Yes, right on. Every time.
No investigation, no right to speak.
Right on.
Because I'm coming from science. And either Bilal historically brought them from the mountains of Ethiopia, or he didn't. Because all I need to know is how come this faith system and this way of living came to this land almost overnight? How could that be? With no trial and error, no belief system, it just appears. And it unites these tribes. And those of Eurasian descent who have been doing battle with Africans upon the death of the prophet, they say, I don't think I want those black people now to leave Islam after Muhammad. So, we're going to split. You Sunni, I Shia. And that's the split of Islam. And this is why when we got into Iraq, all of a sudden, see, we always talk about Islam. I'm speaking of us as a collective people. Now all of a sudden, we're hearing these wars between the Shiite and the Sunni. They're saying, but wait a minute, what Shiite, Sunni? You know, what do you have a Protestant movement too? You know what? Orthodox, protest, you have Shiite, you have Sunni. What is the difference? Well, the difference is along color lines. Sunni is African, original, Shiite is the adopted. And once we understand this, and just read the article, don't believe a word I say. And if I am wrong, I am willing to take a side step, but just show me where I'm wrong. Show me where Chinwelu is wrong when he talks about the role that Africans played in the expansion and development of Islam. Now you can't go without looking at African women in Moorish Europe. The role of women was totally equal to men. They could own land, they were doctors, they were lawyers, they ran things just like men. I'm sorry?
Generals in the army.
Yes. Generals in the army, exactly. What they could do, they did. But they had to do it. When you look at the article written by our good brother, may I call his name out, Dr. Edward Scott. He wrote an essay called African Popes. And then you understand why the Christian church split under Militatus, who was an African pope, and Constantine was trying to unite the European Christians of the Roman and the Eastern Orthodox from Constantinople. And then you understand why the split occurred and what the fundamental difference between an African faith system is from a European faith system, because to Africans, Jesus the Christ was an extraordinary, supernatural person, but was not the only Son of God. Not to mention that African Christians looked at Jesus the Christ more as a symbolic metaphor for the path of life than an actual human being that lived, that we can track down Pontius Pilate, we can track down everybody in the whole issue, but we can't find this man called Jesus Christ. We can find everybody else. Not to mention, of course, the letter J didn't exist back in those days, so that's a whole other thing altogether.
Yeah, right.
Because they said it looked like a phallic symbol, so we weren't going to put that in the alphabet. That's why above his Christian cross it says INRI. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. That's why the name was not Jehovah, it was Yahweh. It was not JHVH. It was YHWH, which is the symbol in mathematics of the trapezoid, or the crossing over of the sides. We don't know this. See, we got to get into this discussion. And again, I respect every faith system. Because, you know, quite frankly, I believe that for all of its intentions, if it wasn't for Christianity, we might not have been able to deal with that situation. Christianity came to us at a time when we needed to be able to hook into something or someone. When we were treated so horrifically that we needed to find another person that went through something like that. And not only that, but split history in half. He became so great. And so in this story of this resurrected Savior, we didn't want this life just to be a life lived and gone. We saw in this Jesus Christ, in this Christianity, not only our own faith system of communism, but we also saw a way to get to tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. And without a mental crutch to get us there, we may not mentally have been able to do it. So Christianity in its place was a most powerful situation. So I respect it. I respect every faith system. Just live it. Don't tell me your religion and then act like a heathen. Don't tell me God told you to kill somebody, because God never tells you to kill somebody. Another force. That's why in ancient Egypt you had Heru and Heru Kuti, the righteous inheritor and the righteous warrior. So when it was time to go to war, Heru Kuti came. When it was time to have peace, Heru came. When it's time to go to war, Malcolm comes. When it's time to have peace, Martin Luther King comes. But don't mix Martin and Malcolm. When it's Malcolm's time, act like Malcolm. When it's Martin's time, you act like Martin. When it's Heru's time, you act like Heru. When it's Heru Kuti's time, you act like Heru Kuti. We got to get this together. We have to look at ourselves. And brothers and sisters, I am just really, I love us. I love you. I love our children. And I think we need to tell each other this more and mean it. Tell our children, I love you. And because of that, I'm going to have mercy on you. And sometimes mercy comes through tough love. But know that I love you. And what I do because you need to have mercy. You need to pull your pants up, put a belt in them loops. I'm tired of seeing them dirty drawers. I understand it's the prison mentality. I understand that. I understand the word nigger. And I personally don't have a problem with the word nigger, because nigger means God. The word nigger historically is the word that during the Punic Wars, when the Romans came upon Africans, they said, who are you? And they said, Inja, Inga, Negus Negusti. I am a god. I am a leader. I'm the King of Kings, Lord of Lords. I come from Nigeria. The Romans took that word and put it in their vocabulary. It became Negro, Negro, Negro. But I must also tell you this. There is a symbol that a lady by the name of Madame Blavatsky went and studied Buddhism and looked at a symbol that meant the universe, the law of opposites, all things and everything combined. She brought it back to Europe, and there was a young man living in Germany that took that symbol and he made it the emblem of the party he was about to create. He took a sacred symbol and his dirty, filthy, trashy hands made it dirty. He took a sacred symbol and made it dirty. And if I should put that symbol on the board, and there would be people of different faith systems observing it, they'd get upset with me but they wouldn't hear me when I say this is an ancient sacred symbol that you can find in Ghana, you can find in Nigeria, you can find in Egypt, you can find in India. But because a dirty man touched it, he dirtied what was good. The word Negro is not a bad word. But white supremacists put their dirty, filthy hands on it and made it dirty. So when I talk to our young people about that word nigger, I don't have a problem with the word nigger. Just understand that a dirty man put his hands on it. We put it in the garbage. Why are your hands in the garbage? Why are you picking that word back up after we threw it away? Not because it's a bad word, but because somebody dirtied it. So brother, I tell the young brothers, and see, as older brothers we got to talk, and as older sisters we talk to them historically about the word. I don't have a problem with that word. It's the social connotation that was put on it by dirty people. The same way people of various faith systems have a problem with a sacred symbol that means everything and all. It's a wonderful symbol, but it's been dirty. Negro, nigger is a beautiful word, but it's been dirtied by the social connotation that's been put on it. So when we talk to our children about this word, I encourage us to be historically accurate and explain to them. It don't make a difference how you spell it. You can put an AH on it, you can leave it with an A, but no matter what, it still will conjure up in those who put their life on the line during this social context. Why we as elders have a problem with this word, just understand it. And tell them, young brothers, that our sisters aren't bitches. Tell them what a bitch is. Explain it to them. Because when I talk to them, they say it's a female dog. No, it's not. It's a female dog in heat, which will go with anything and anybody. It'll hump itself up against the wall. It'll touch things that it shouldn't touch. That's a bitch. And when you call a woman a bitch, you call your mother a bitch. You can't call one and not call them all. So young brothers, I say be careful. If you want to keep using that word, that's your business. But now that I tell you what it means, just keep in mind every time you use that word, put your mother's face in the face of the woman you're talking to. Because that's who you're calling a bitch. And you see, I use these words. I hope the elders know, I hope I don't offend you. But I use these words because we hear them all the time. We hear them on the bus. We hear them on the train. We hear it in a rap. We hear it amongst themselves. And they say because the word doesn't mean anything, I can say it, but it does mean something. Because what you call into the universe, you can't call back. The word is supreme and it is sacred. And once we know this, we shall overcome by any means necessary. We are a mighty people who will rise by the will of our wills, because Bob Marley teaches us that no one can curse who Jah bless. And the fact that we stay here, Jah has blessed us. Shemem Hotep Amun.
Let us hold hands. The prophet has spoken.
Yes, he did.
There's no need for another word. We are an African people. Robbed from our homeland. Robbed of our history. The knowledge of our greatness. But men like Dr. Power is restoring that greatness. Our consciousness reawakens our greatness. Up, you mighty people. You can accomplish what you will. Let's will ourselves back to ourselves. No justice, no peace. No justice, no peace. No justice. Hit the drums. We haven't heard John in a long time. Johnny's gonna play a little something for us.
Well, I'll be out. Thank you, brother.
Next week, that's the way what I'm doing. Yes, yes.
Get on here.